Cool. So Johnny's going to talk to us about installing or getting electric vehicles here. And I just want to point out that when he first started ordering electric vehicles for the town of Jackson, he happened to be the director of the solid or the waste. What was it? Sorry, the wastewater treatment center. So you never know who your champion is going to be. It could be you. It could be other people. So you just have to get the right team in place to make it happen.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Very critical. Alicia hit on some parts, but like knowing what your fleet is, right? You can do a lot with knowing what your fleet is and how you can get your municipalities to pay or make sure there's funding available for your vehicles when they are up for replacement. We build out all of our vehicle lists, and we have every department pay into that fund. So it's like a rental fee. So every department within the town of Jackson pays a yearly cost to have their car, right? So it's a depreciation. It's we do 5%. We model it in Excel. That way, every year, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars going into this account. So when you go to replace these vehicles, because you know when they were bought, you know how long they are, you give them a depreciation cycle, a life cycle, that money will be in there. This is key. This is key because without money, you are not going to get these vehicles, right? Unless you're just going to fly by the seat of your pants and be like, oh, we got some money, somewhere, we'll scrape it together. Having those funds together is really, really key. The fleet calculator that Alicia talked about is super key as well. If you have some electeds that are a little hesitant, whenever I present a staff report for a new vehicle, I take the vehicle I'm replacing and I put the vehicle that I'm purchasing and showing what the difference is in terms of CO2, how much fuel you're going to save, whether it's a more efficient vehicle or if it's an EV. Those are real savings in your budget. So it's hard to argue that, right? We've come a long way with our EVs. We first purchased 3 police motorcycles, like, I don't even know, 2010, that we drive around in the summer. They're super nice. We got one of the first EV Polaris side-by-sides that we use down the treatment plant. We have this like really funny golf cart looking thing. It's kind of like a truck, but it's really weird, doesn't have heat or anything. But in 2015, that's what was available, right? So you can see like where we've come in almost 10 years. It's amazing. And so now, whenever we replace anything, we work really closely with the person who's buying it. And I really try to like get them to go electric. And it's easier now because we have a lot more options that we can choose from, trucks, cars, and that sort of stuff. So we've expanded our fleet. We have bolts. We use bolts for parking meter enforcement or parking enforcement, which is really good. We have 2 of them now. We have we just ordered 2 more Ford Lightnings. We'll probably buy Ford Lightnings every single year, or maybe a Chevy. It's great. Like on my Bolt, I have a sticker. You know how you have the sticker that says, "Hey, don't forget in 20,000 miles, you got to come in and do something," right? So I go to our mechanics and I'm like, "Well, you put the sticker in, like you got to do something." And he's like, "I don't know. What do I do?" I'm like, "I don't know. Change the windshield washer fluid." Like, it's amazing. Like, there's no oil, there's coolant, right? But like, it's so maintenance free. I mean, you have brakes, you have tires, and you have all that sort of stuff that you have to do. The other big key, and just talked about it a little bit, is your infrastructure, right? So what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do you buy the car first? Do you have the infrastructure first? You should kind of consider both of those at the same time. I think you need to really think about your infrastructure, how it's going to tie in electrically to your building. Like Jesse said, you might not have enough juice in the building, so you might have to get that redesigned and have a plan for like how are you going to deploy charging for a lot of your fleet vehicles is pretty key. The dummy chargers, I totally recommend. We have a lot of chargers that are connected to the internet, so you have to use the app, you have to swipe a card, you know, and I guarantee you there's going to be times when you're standing there and nothing is happening because the connectivity is a little wonky. But they do make chargers that you just unplug and plug in and they start charging. It's really great. For us, for our work that we do in the community, we buy the lowest level EV cars. What I mean by that is we're not buying the bigger EV battery packages. Of course, we have cheetah skin seats and all that stuff because we're Jackson, but you don't need the extra batteries. If you're driving 30, 40 miles a day, which for us is a lot, right? Like, you don't need the extra batteries. You buy the low level model in terms of the battery package and save yourselves some money as well, because you're just going to charge them every single night. So that's where having a good charging system is going to save you on the purchase price of your EV vehicle as well. And they're super fun to drive. Like, I've had lots of staff that were very hesitant. They're like, well, I need this, I need all-wheel drive, I need this, and now, like, I just pull up in a Ford Lightning, and I'm like, take this thing for a spin. And they're like, done. I want one. These things are great. So I can't speak highly enough about EV vehicles. Obviously, we as an organization are going to look at renewable diesel as well because we have a lot of heavy equipment that obviously that technology is not there yet. So we're looking at all those kind of options in terms of all the things that we can do, all the tricks in our bag that we can do to modify our fleet and lower our carbon footprint as much as possible. So if you guys are really thinking about doing this, again, really have a good funding model for your maintenance, for your vehicles. We used to do it this way, which was have one account and every year throw some money into it. And when you had to buy a vehicle or a new grader or a new loader or a new police car, you just are like, you take that money out. But sometimes there's no money there. So you don't want to not be replacing your vehicles at the end of their life cycle, whether it's 10, 15, 20 years. You want to be able to be replacing them. And like Alicia said, when you replace it, if you don't replace it with something that's going to be super efficient or the most efficient thing that you can get, or an EV, you just miss that opportunity. Because I guarantee you, you're going to buy that vehicle and you're going to sit on it until its life cycle is over, which might be in 10, 12, 15 years. And then you're like, well, we'll replace it to something then. So really thinking about working with your staff, figuring out what they need. Again, we have way more opportunities now for different types of vehicles. We started putting in our public chargers downtown 2008, 10, somewhere. We put one on the town square and one in a parking lot. And people freaked out because there was, I think, one Nissan Leaf in town that was a hybrid. And I think Alicia might have owned it. But I don't even think we had a full EV vehicle in town at the time. But now look at the town, right? I mean, now look at the Teslas. Now look at, Cybertrucks, Ford Lightnings, Chevy Bolts. I mean, you name it. Like, they're all over the place. And so I think communities are going to struggle a little bit. Like, one of my pet peeves is, I tell people all the time, you don't see a town of Jackson owned gas station in town, right? They're like, no, but we're not in that business. We don't sell fuel. I don't want to sell electric. I don't want to sell power. Not that we are. I mean, all of our chargers are free. But like, you have to maintain them. You have to always fix them. It's kind of an issue. But like, communities need to step up and start offering this type of charging around. I know in like Southern California, there's new gas stations that are just electric, which are great. It's super awesome. Maintenance, yeah, there's a bigger upfront cost, but it's not that much more if you're talking about buying a brand new half-ton pickup truck. And if you look at the life cycle and what you're going to save in fuel and maintenance, it's not even it's not a hard decision to make. And it's not a hard decision to present to your electeds either if you just show them the cost. it's a win-win for everybody. But definitely think about the infrastructure. So Tesla, they did something really, really, really smart. A long time ago, 2006, 2007, they weren't even making cars. And what was the first thing that they did? They put in chargers, right? And they came here to Jackson, and they were like, hey, we want to come to one of your parking lots. We're going to put in all these awesome chargers, and it's not going to cost you anything. And we were like, no, thank you. Because it's just for Tesla. Like, we need chargers for every, general chargers for cars. But what they did is they started building this infrastructure in these corridors for all their chargers. So when they started selling cars, it's not, that hard to think like, oh, how do I get to Seattle? How do I get to San Francisco? How do I get to LA from Jackson? They already had that kind of built out. So think about your infrastructure. Think about the type of infrastructure that you're using. We deploy level 2 chargers, and we have DC fast chargers. You can just have an electrician wire in a 220 plug in your garage, in your shop, at your office. It doesn't have to be a fancy level 2 charger. They're not that expensive, but like all you need is a plug, right? It's the same plug you plug your dryer in, right? You just need that plug, and you need it wired into your panel. So it's not very hard, but like Alicia said, you can also use the 120 as well. It just takes a little bit longer. Any questions?
Yeah, I'm from Ridgeway, Colorado. We have told our police department that they will start electrifying. They're very resistant. They're telling us that they're asking around it. Our marshal actually put together a great report. He talked to a bunch of other municipalities. He says that they don't do well in the cold. They charge to like 70% instead of 100%. I guess some of the full electric are hard to turn because each wheel has its own little motor, so they don't have a tight turning radius. What's your answer to the police force concern?
Wrong.
Yeah. The turning is like an EV will turn just as well as a normal car. Like, not a big deal. About 10 years ago, I made a lot of friends in the police department because I was advocating them to be in Priuses, right? Like, that didn't go over very well. But what's hard about the police department, and yeah, what you said in the wintertime. So in the summertime, my Bolt, I'll plug in, I'll get 300 miles on a full charge. I would drive that thing for 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks before I charge it again. I'm just in town going all over the place. Police are different, and it's annoying to me, but like I understand why they do it. So our police department will usually, especially in the wintertime, they'll idle their cars outside of town hall, right? But when they have an emergency, they don't have time to warm the engine up, wait for the windows to defrost. They have a ton of equipment in there. Like we build their cars, and it's a ton of equipment. And the equipment's always changing. It's always becoming more high tech. They got cameras. They got all this stuff.
It's like 20 grand on top. We just got a presentation. It's like
20 grand.
the cost of the vehicle.
Yep. And that's not including the labor like that we charge them. So I think it's hard for the police department. You need to like ease in and find things like what we did. Get them some EV freaking motorcycles. Like, they'll be psyched. Or they'll use those in the wintertime, and they'll be super, super psyched to use those. Or in the summertime.
We're going to start with the Power Boost, the one that's kind of an electric hybrid.
So we swapped over our builds to hybrids, and they're great. But right now, every every municipality has a police department that's trying to meet a sustainability goal are buying the Ford Interceptor hybrid motors. And last year, they were like, we can't even give them to you. You got to like either remove your order or we'll give you a normal, one. So the hybrids are there. They're a great source to go to if you can get them if they start building more because like your MPG goes up a ton, right? And for the police department, they love them as well because they have super good power. They can still do their job. They can still have all their stuff. But look for things like, if you have parking enforcement. Like we have two Chevy Bolts with a ton of software and equipment in there because they have plate recognition systems and stuff like that. And and they just cruise around all day, and they love it. I did have them in a Polaris side by side with a gas engine, which in the wintertime wasn't super psyched, like a little cold, like. But now they just have a normal car. They have normal seatbelts. They have normal windshield wipers. Get in with the police department where you can. And I just don't think for us, the PD isn't quite there yet in terms of having that. But I'm sure it'll happen. Yeah.
So, I'm the mayor of our town. We have the same thing with the cops, right? But we did Ford hybrid to start, but we have a Ford Lightning on order, all electric, right? So it can be done. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
The vehicles are there. Yeah. So
One of the things we struggle with is staff retention, right? So I'm sure a lot of you guys deal with staff retention, especially in the mountain town communities. So one of the ways that we are able to maintain a full police department generally staffed up is we let our cops take their cars home. We used to charge them for fuel, but now we don't. We just nixed that about a month ago. But they get to drive their vehicles home, right? And so that throws another wrench into it when you're thinking of okay, cool. Now you should put in a charger at your house because you're not going to be able to get to work. Yeah, and definitely you brought up a good point about winter use. It's kind of when you buy a car and they're like, yeah, you're going to get 25 miles a gallon, and then you're like, well, most of my driving's in town, I'm getting 17. So in the wintertime, you're going to use a lot more power. Your vehicle is going to have a very smart computer system, and it's going to remember how much energy you've been using, right? So you'll plug in, you'll get a full charge, and instead of 300, it'll be 150. And you're like, what the hell? I should have 300 miles. But the computer's saying, no, all last week you used your heater, and the week before you used your heater, so we know you're going to use your heater again, and we're only going to give you this much. But there's a little bit of ways around that where you can you always turn on your car when it's plugged in. You always heat your cabin when it's plugged in. Then you're not using the battery, you're just using the juice from the plug. It's like a Yeti cooler. You always pre-chill it, right? So with your cars, you have to preheat it, or if they're in a heated garage, then you can just keep them there. You had a question, yeah?
Hold on. I don't think. Did you finish what your question was or your statement?
I guess it wasn't really a question. It was just
Okay.
for me being an elected, as some people like to call us, if you just, we have a very aggressive goal in our town. So there isn't any discussion, is the next vehicle going to be electric? Of course it's going to be electric.
Yeah.
If it's available, right? Well, it's great renewable diesel thing you guys did, a couple hours ago. Because we can't get graders and all this stuff electric. But the bottom line is all this stuff is available and all of it you can do. And I understand that before you couldn't get the lightnings, they're on back order. Well, now it's the opposite. Now they have such a surplus, they're actually cheaper. So if you can just set that culture in your organization, then there's no question about what's going to be next, in my opinion.
Good comments.
My question was just if either of you have utilized the municipal tax credits in purchasing the EVs.
I'm not sure exactly how the municipal tax credits is that we don't pay tax. So whenever we buy anything, we don't pay any tax. There's so many parts and pieces that are moving and changing within the last year that keeping up with all the new things that you can do. Alicia was saying the tax credit was now open up to government agencies where it wasn't before. I haven't used it yet because the last Ford Lightning I bought was used. It had 1,000 miles on it. It was new, right? But it was used, and they wouldn't do anything for me because I bought a used car. So we'll find out now when I buy, when we purchase these two new Ford Lightnings.
And I know Eric with Teton County is going through that process right now so that they can use that for I think a purchase they had recently. And then one of the things that Natalie with the City of Bozeman said is she asked the dealership to have that taken off in advance of purchasing it. So there's like a couple different routes that you can take, but maybe somebody else in the room has done it. But I have heard it's kind of a bit of paperwork and back and forth and such. But once you set it up, then you're kind of good to go.
Something I just want to raise that's been a little bit of a surprise to us and has to do is we've electrified quite a bit of our fleet and are looking at like heavy duty vehicle electrification now and DC fast charging. One thing that's been a very real surprise to us is the kind of not hidden but unknown costs of electric vehicle charging on our utility bill. So it's like
Yeah.
there is a cost savings, but the costs almost shift. And I think that in discussions around fleet electrification, we forget to budget for increased electricity usage, especially with DC fast charging, with many utilities charging what's called a demand charge, which can be exorbitant, like $6,000 to $8,000 a month if you are using energy in the peak of winter. So that's just been something like I want to raise awareness about, because it's not a zero-sum game where it's like we save all this money on fuel, you still have to budget for increased electricity usage.
Well, and that's something that we talk a lot. We talk. That's when a lot of transit agencies were electrifying. Then that was something that they were dealing with and surprised about. And that's when it's really important, the planning process of, because you can work with your utility to hopefully, have different time of use rates and like really, work with them to make sure that you don't want those demand charges. If they know you're going to be charging, like it's just some planning. And I don't know if you've gotten to a good place where you aren't having to pay those, or if that's still a problem.
I mean, the demand charges really come into play when you're talking about DC fast charging, and it's not about time of use, it's about how much energy the utility has to retain for you the moment you need that vehicle. And so it's just like a flat fee.
Yeah, the peak demand charge. And then there's a way around that too. There are chargers like FreeWire that are essentially a big battery pack, and it fills that up at a slow rate, and you use it quickly, so you can avoid that. There are you can couple it with a generator, which some people might think sucks, but if you can cut off that peak, you can save tons of money. You can stagger your charging. There are smart grid ways to deal with that now, as it's becoming more known of how that works. But for sure, there are ways around it, and it's a significant thing if you're not expecting it, for sure.
Yeah, and you need to know your utility rate structure. So, like, if they have a tiered rate system where it's like, charging during the day is cheap or more expensive, and then charging at night or using electricity at night is cheaper, you need to understand that. We had electric buses. We have electric buses, Proterras. I don't know if you guys have ever heard about Proterra and the complete shit show that's going on with them right now. And we put in a live website called eGauge. It's typically used on solar systems, but we work with INEL out of Idaho Falls to do data collection on EV buses, right? And they were very interested in knowing like how much power they're using and stuff like that. And so I could see the demand charge or the demand, right? And for us, it's the highest 15 minutes in a month. And I think it's typical for other people, but like you can manage that a little bit.
Well, there are smart chargers that will do exactly that.
Exactly.
When it gets there,
Yeah.
it stops and it limits it so it won't go above that. And then so you extend your charge time, but it won't let it, it'll prevent you from getting there. So there are smart
Yeah.
ways, chargers to do that now.
We have a question back here too.
Yeah.
At Park City and Park City Transit, we have almost 20. We're taking delivery now of buses we ordered.
Hopefully they're Gilligs.
Yes. We do have 4 Proterras though, and we're trying to retire those early, but that's a different conversation. We are having a lot of trouble insuring the battery-powered buses because the insurance companies are scared of having all the buses in one bus farm and something happening to them. I think it's because of the Proterras, but I'm just wondering if anybody else is having insurance issues.
We haven't had insurance issues, but it's definitely brought up to, we looked at that specifically with the fire department because we had 7 or 8 inside, right? So like what happens if one catches on fire, right? When it's charging or something bad happens, how do you extinguish the fire? But we've never experienced that. Granted, our buses weren't on the road like super long, so we had them for a couple years, but we haven't had any issues insuring them through our municipality, local municipality insurance.
That's curious. I'll reach out to the Clean Cities Network to hear if anybody else has. Yeah.
Looking at, you know, you have a large transit fleet.
Well, did you guys see on the news when the hurricanes hit Florida, like all the EV cars? Like, my mom is complete, like, well, see, I told you the EV cars are terrible. You see them all catching on fire when they're. I'm like, Mom, like everything fails in a flood. Like, come on. But no, it's interesting, and our fire department here had to do special training, especially over the last like 8 years when more and more EV cars were coming into the community, were being purchased in the community, because putting out those battery fires it's a complete different ball of wax. But good question, for sure. Yeah.
We've had the same issue brought up by our fire department in Whitefish, that, it's too dangerous, to have EVs in the city fleet because of the possibility of fires. So that's something it's good to get more information out to the cities about.
EVs catch fire far less than gasoline cars, so that's just a fact. I guess the fires are more intense, and you have to treat them differently, but they don't combust as frequently.
Yeah, I think for us, it's more of like if someone gets in a wreck on the highway, right, and it catches on fire, like that's a problem. It's not just spontaneously combusting in a garage. So, knock on wood, I haven't heard that happening yet in our community.
The other concern we had raised was our mechanic, and I didn't talk to anybody, talked to Parks Department, they were looking into an EV. And our mechanic was concerned about working on an EV and it being dangerous for the mechanic. Is there anything to that, or is that total?
I mean, working on a diesel bus is dangerous, right? I mean, they're not dealing with that same voltage, It is a little bit nuanced. They do need, potentially some more training. When it comes to like those battery systems, like our we don't even deal with them. We just take them to our local dealer, and have them deal with it. So, and your local dealers also have to have staff on board as well to be able to work on EVs. So it's a learning curve for everybody. But I would bet that, the people who don't want EVs or who don't like EVs in your municipality, in your organization, they will always come to you with a problem. Like, it's this, it's not this. And I'm not saying they're not, maybe there's valuable, concerns, but I think it's all, you can work through them for sure.
I imagine. It's just, in our area in northwestern Montana, there are EVs, but nothing like other areas. They're not very common yet, so there won't be many mechanics in the area that know anything about them. So, yeah, there would have to be some training.
Yeah. Any other questions? Are we out of time?
Yeah, we are.
Oh, nice. Thank you.